G'day guys, Mac with the Outer Circle, and today's episode is partly inspired by a chat we had on the weekend. Boys and myself, we did a live stream, and in that live stream certain things came up. One of which was the responsibility of being the owner of an IP. And, well, I bring it up because intellectual property is one of these weird things where if someone's created a story and you buy into it, okay, you're buying into their universe, and you're also going to accept, for better or worse, the changes they want to make to the universe that they've created from the ground up. I think all of us can accept this. The problem that we run into in modern times is when intellectual property gets bought by someone else. And when that someone else starts making changes, especially if they're bad changes, or at least bad to you. In my case, I think many of the changes that have been made to this game, the Horus Heresy, and especially 40k by extension, there are many, many bad changes, bad design decisions that have happened over the years, and you're sort of told, suck it up, because they own the IP. But the problem is, with this IP and many others, again, Star Wars, Star Trek, all that sort of thing, they've all suffered from this. It's not the original creators. It's just someone who had to be in the right location at the right time or had money. And they essentially end up with the intellectual property. And then they abuse it, damage it, whatever, in the quest for money short term. And we just sort of have to accept that. And that's a really weird thing because, unfortunately, that's wrong, but also it's right. It sounds very, very silly. So let me delve into that a little here. I don't feel like we should have to accept it, but by extension, we don't have the right to force the hand of those who do own it. And we're in this really weird place as a society because of that, as in Western society, where we have all these different properties. It's like, well, Disney, for example, they own Star Wars because they bought it. They didn't earn the right to it. They didn't do anything interesting with it, in my opinion. And we just have to suck it up. And no one can create something interesting with Star Wars who's at Disney and have to run that by the fans at the same time, because the fans are all going to have different opinions on what good would be. It's in a really weird spot. And we see that with things like Rings of Power. Okay, they buy a license from the Tolkien estate and then proceed to make the worst ever Tolkien adaptation possible. They just absolutely dump it out onto the market, and it's not following Tolkien's his world, his ideals in the least, apart from just recycling names of places and people, which is kind of sad. And it's like, at what point do you lose rights to the ownership of something because you've mishandled it so badly? There is no such point. And this brings me, in a roundabout way, to the Horus Heresy. Because, well, here is the Solar Auxilia range in plastic, as it currently stands on your screen. And you'll see there's the Solar Auxilia Basilisk Medusa there at $110 dues Australian. Yes, it's expensive. We're not talking about prices or anything like that today. What I want to talk about is the writers of this game who inherited the legacy of Alan Bligh. And they keep producing underperforming rules, and they don't really touch them a lot. If we jump across to the Heresy downloads, you can see when they were last updated. So we're coming up on 6 months for most of them. And when you go into them, like say the main rulebook, well, a whole bunch of it's dedicated to just talking about reactions, and then some clarifications on some special rules, some erratas. But really, the last time they touched it, they just added these little question and answers in here, which are questions that often don't make sense. Is there a limit on the number of optional detachments I'd include in the army? No. Well, okay. If a model is making attacks with a weapon that the barrage special rule has line of sight to their target, can you choose to fire the weapon indirectly as long as the target is still over the minimum range for that attack? Yes, that's been the thing for like 20 years. These are the sort of questions they choose to answer, and yet you'll see after 2 years, we're 8 pages in length? half of which is blank space. It's a rather pathetic FAQ. And then we look at something like the Liber Imperium, or all this stuff with the Solar Auxilia. The chance to change it for the better? No, we're sitting at page and a half. That says 2 pages, but it's a page and a half. You can see it's all blank on one side. What about the Exemplary Battles, the Age of Darkness? It's 1 errata and 1 FAQ. Well, 2 FAQ questions. It's a single page, and it's not even a page. It's a third of a page, maybe, of actual something of substance. It's just the most bare minimum lazy effort. And then I look at something like the Basilisk Medusa. And this specifically is what spurred the video, is we have a vehicle which does not function correctly in the current game. And the more games that you play involving Solar Auxilia and Militia, you'll see that they're cut from a different cloth to the rest of the factions. And to an extent, Mechanicum is as well, because they suffer from a lot of the same problems as Solar Auxilia and Militia do. They just have a few extra tools in the bag that let them, catch up to the power level that the Astartes have. I think the people who wrote the edition, and I've made no bones about saying this in the past, I think they did a very, very bad job of writing the edition. For numerous reasons, which I'm more than happy to have gone into, and I've done it in multiple episodes. I think the key ones to look at, though, are the videos I've done on understanding and assessing unit power levels, or Legion power levels. That has its own playlist on the channel, and in there I go in depth into how rules work and interact with one another on the tabletop in order to demonstrate why something does or doesn't work. And with the Solar Auxilia, a common thread that occurred was people writing on the Facebook posts, because that's pretty much the only way you can sort of social media interact with the company, writing on the post, the Solar Auxilia Basilisk needs new rules. Are you going to change the rules? And this happened from when they previewed it, every time they showed a picture of it, up until when they said the pre-orders for it are dropping. Different people are commenting the same things, and it's lots of people that are commenting it, because the unit doesn't work, and yet they've refused to change it. Well, why is this? And that's the question at the heart of it all today. Why are they so fixated on not changing things that are busted in the edition? And this is where fan pressure, and why I gave you that sort of little weird intro about intellectual property came from originally. We are applying pressure to the company. We can't be having all the say, right? There needs to be a give and take in there. I think everything needs some level of balance, a degree of balance. And we're applying pressure on them to say, look, change it to suit us in a better way. And when this goes to extremes, you get 40k, where it's every 5 minutes there's an FAQ, there's an FAQ, there's an FAQ, and it's a mess. But with heresy, when we do get an FAQ, well, they don't cover things that need fixing. There's huge glaring holes in what needs to be touched. It's like what you're telling me, that this is all of the issues that you could come up with in a year and a half for the Liber Imperium. Or this is all of the issues in the entire rule set for the edition, in all of the issues that have happened in 2 years. And we know that that's basically, it's a lie. That's a fib. That's not true. There are many, many more issues than this, but people are failing to fix this, to remedy this. And I'm curious as to what the mentality is here. All I can pinpoint is that if it goes into print and people are paying for it, they won't touch it, no matter how much they screw it up. And a great example, this might be something like contemptor dreadnoughts. Okay, we all know at this point what probably needs to happen to fix them. Something around a 50 points adjustment upwards, as well as increased costs on the different weapons that they have available to them. Because there's no way a contemptor dreadnought should be paying, 5-10 points for the Gravis multi-melter. It's just ridiculous what the points values are on those units. And it's so there's simple fixes out there for many of these problems. And when it comes to artillery vehicles, like the Solar Auxilia Basilisk Medusa, it is incredibly inefficient and overpriced. And of course, that's an expensive model in real world dollars terms, money terms, as well as the in-game points. So it's a worst of both worlds situation that we have right there. And it's just, I don't get what the insistence is with just sticking with things that don't work or are broken, because people find it very frustrating, myself especially included in here. And we're at the point now where the good grace that I was giving Horus Heresy, right? Heresy 2.0 has a grace period. I think every game system to some extent has a grace period. And in the case of Heresy 2.0, the grace period for me is basically been about 18 months to 2 years. Okay, you're coming off COVID, not that that's a real excuse, but because, you're writing stuff here. Like, you're writing rules. It's not like it requires heavy industry input here. But Heresy 1 had a decade to build itself up, okay? It had a decade to come to terms with its rules and to create a working rule set. And there are always going to be teething issues. Heresy 1 did have a couple of teething issues when you go back and look at it. But compared to 2.0, Heresy 1 looks like a flawless project. And Heresy 2, unfortunately, they've really dragged out the process of fixing the problems with the edition. Many of which, I think can be traced back to reactions and to unit stat lines and special rules that they changed up. The multiple unit typings now that exist have created a lot of issues in the background because of their positive and negative interactions they have with one another, which cause you to flip through the book 3 times fast trying to find out how they function some days. But all of these things combined mean that I think that the grace period is gone. It's like, okay, you either need to fix the game, or essentially you need to explain, justify why you feel that this edition is the one that should be succeeding and thriving and supported instead of Heresy 1, which was a more fully fledged game. Heresy 2 has been able to build on the foundation of Heresy 1 because, well, everything was written for it. All they had to do was copy the homework that existed from previous edition and tweak it with their new rules and modifications. It wasn't like they wrote this from the ground up for every single unit. And it shows because they copied many points values across wholesale without understanding how they interacted in the new edition. Case in point, Contemptor Dreadnought. Or Thunderhammers, okay? Very important, these things. And when you look at Heresy 1, at where it was at the 2-year mark, think of how comprehensive the Heresy 1 game was, books-wise, and what you got. Because by the 2-year mark in Heresy 1, you've got all the way up to book 4. Because that first year that took place was book 1 and 2. Then 6 months later, book 3, and then another 6 months later, book 4. Basically, the release schedule was very quick in early Heresy 1, because it was super popular. So you already had most of your legions. You had knights, you had Solar Auxilia, and only 6 months after that, you're going to get the Ultramarines, Militia, updated Word Bearers list, a few other little tweaks. You've also got your Specialist Campaign rules that came in Book 4 as well. So Heresy 1 was in a pretty good place, considering it was a specialist game handled by the Forge World team, and they were making everything in resin. Heresy 2 over here, on the other hand, you've got mainline Games Workshop, even if the team is still a small team in comparison, and you're getting plastic support. Everything is dropping in plastic, although at resin prices, and yet they're still failing in that key area of rules writing, which is really bizarre because, I mean, it's written on paper, and not even on paper, it's digitally written, Microsoft Word, type it up. Why won't they come and fix the things that are broken? And the community is telling them repeatedly, these are the broken things. And you're seeing the same offenders popping up time and time again. The way Brutal interacts, the way Dreadnoughts interact, the fact that every fucking turn that you play seems to be Night Fight now. Oh, if you're playing Militia or Solar Auxilia, you just want to be able to roll something higher than a 5 in turn 1. It's so hard. It's painful. Having played Militia this edition, it is painful. Having to go through that Night Fight in turn 1 and often turn 2. If you're going against Night Lords, turn 3 and screw you on top of it because terror. It's all these things that are really frustrating about the edition. And my question to you, the viewers, is why? Why do you think this is? Why won't they accept that maybe, since all of the players and all of the playtesters, by the way, all the playtester feedback I've seen was saying, fix these very issues that I'm talking about. If we're all saying it, what is the go? What is the hubris happening here that says, no, all of you, the people who actually play this game, outside of Games Workshop's weird, contrived, controlled circumstances, maybe all of you are wrong, is what the company's saying here. And I think it's a terrible place to be sitting at. Because, no, the community is not wrong here at all. You know, we are the ones playing it. All I can think of that's happened is someone in the company, you know, let's take the Medusa, for example. Medusa was an artillery tank that could just absolutely destroy Terminator squads in Heresy 1. But players didn't really complain about it. It could be annoying at times, but I've never seen people say remove them from the game. People found ways to cope with it. You know, termite with a couple of melter guns in it, or a drop hole with a couple of melter guns, or a haywire team, whatever it was. People had ways of dealing with those vehicles. And yet, for some reason, they thought they needed to nerf these things in the ground so hard they can't even kill basic Marines, despite costing more by 150 to 200% than the weakest of Marine squads, tactical squads. It's really bizarre. All I can think is that the people who wrote this were sitting there and they played Heresy 1 and they would deep strike a squad of Terminators in. Nice, tight, bunched up together, which is usually not a smart move. And then when the most obvious thing would happen, a Vindicator or Medusa shell would be fired, smack bang, hit those Terminators and kill pretty much all of them. They would then crack the sads about, you know, woe is me, I was a tactical genius, how did I end up in this situation? And their solution to that was, rather than adapting their tactics and saying, that was really stupid to blob up in the middle of an open table with all my Terminators in a spot right in front of the enemy artillery. Instead, they said, no, the correct solution here to fix this game is to remove the artillery from being a threat in the first place to anything. Yeah, you can see the problem here. And they wrote rules like that. And I don't think, because we know from the playtests that many of the changes they made to things like dreadnoughts and to brutal, they didn't exist in their final form that they were printed in playtesting, right up until the very, very end. And then you saw just a taste of it. So there are some big problems here. They've gone out, they've made unilateral decisions, many of them backfired, and they've doubled down on it. And I don't know why you would double down on it, because they're bad decisions. So at this point, I really just want them to revert to Heresy 1, because it's a better, tighter rule system. Because at least Heresy 1 was fair for all factions, okay? There were problems with Heresy 1. Nothing that couldn't be fixed by a good FAQ. Mournival did a fantastic end-of-life FAQ for Heresy 1, which fixed pretty much all the things that people cared about. It could have been done. But the company didn't want that. They wanted to sort of, I don't know whether they had a percentage rule, like if you change this much percentage of the game, then that will be better. We need to do that in order to justify a new edition. Who knows? Maybe there was hubris in there, like, oh, I can write better than Alan Bly. No, you can't. The Heresy 2 is proof of it. But Heresy 1 is the better game system. Heresy 2, though, there are two game systems going on. There is one which Marines can play in, and there is one that Soul Auxiliary and Militia can play in, okay? And your mileage with your army depends on which league of you're joining. If you're playing against the Soul Rogs, or if you're playing against the Marines. If you're playing against the Marines, you're in for a tough time. It's not to say you can't have fun. There'll be a person typing a comment right now about how they take out their Soul Auxiliary and they always beat the Marine player, and they don't even take Lehman Russ tanks. They're just that fucking good at the game. Well, I'm very, very happy for them. But let's just pretend that most people aren't like that. Because most people are playing, you know, they're actually playing games and telling the truth when they type a comment. And in reality, people are not having a lot of fun when they go up against Marine armies, and you have to take a lot of clutch choices if you do, and you become really restricted in your army lists if you do so, which becomes frustrating. And conversely, if you're something like a Marine player, then you also have to sort of tailor your list if you know you're going against Solar Auxiliary or Militia, by sort of just taking your foot off the gas, taking your foot off the accelerator pedal. Because you're like, okay, if I take Quad Mortars or Medusa or anything like that, they're going to suck against the Marine player, but they're going to be god tier against Solar Aux because, well, they're just instant death to your units. And, things like Volkite, Culver, and heavy support squads will just slay 50 militia a turn, no issue. That's not a worry. So those are considerations that are happening there for the players. But we've been put in this place artificially by just bad writing in the first place. So some thoughts here that would help redress this, because I hate just having a whinge. I want to give some perspective on changes. Obviously, I mentioned things like fixing the contemptor dreadnought, but artillery is a primary one. Turn it back to what it was, for the love of God. Because the one thing that Solar Auxiliary and Militia had was decent amount of heavy firepower in their vehicles with high strength and low AP. That was like, okay, I don't have an awful lot of Medusas, but you need to deal with them quickly because I'm going to hurt you, Marine player. Especially in a game where those Marines can deep strike in at point blank range, just mere inches away from you now, if they're doing a deep strike assault, and charge you straight away. That tank can't reaction fire, can't do anything about that, unless it's going to reaction fire with maybe a heavy bolter. Good luck to you, right? Because of this, it's more cruel than ever to the Solar Auxiliary or the Militia players, and you end up having to ring your tanks with more and more infantry than ever to create some sort of barrier between your vehicles and that kind of punishment. Well, that would be an immediate fix. Give them back their old artillery, or cheapen the artillery up dramatically and give them the ability to buy something like the previous edition's ammunition for a series of points costs. Those are ways that you could handle this problem. And something like the Hermes Light Valtara Sentinels, they go some way towards fixing one of the Solar Auxiliary's flaws, which is their squads don't have any firepower that can hurt anything which is decently tough. But they're incredibly expensive, and you get very few of them for that expensive amount of money. They're cheap in points, so you're going to need a lot of them. And it's just moving goalposts without actually fixing the problem. I think Solar Auxilia need a ground-up rewrite, as the way they work right now at the tercios and all that is just mind blown. And I would suggest that rapiers should actually become a tercio that's a part of your basic las rifle squads. So similar to the way the heavy support or heavy weapon squads would work in old Imperial Guard codexes, they become an upgrade that basically trundle around as a big group attached to infantry units, not in the infantry squad, attached to infantry squads. Okay, so you purchase them during force selection, but they operate independently on the tabletop. And that way your rapiers are providing that heavy support element to your infantry, and also means you can include a bunch of cool rapiers in your army with ease, rather than just including them in heavy support, where the fucking rapier has to compete with the Lehman Russ, and for some reason you can take more Lehman Russes in the same heavy support slot than rapiers, because that makes sense. Sentinels, I would have your heavy sentinels essentially forming a fast attack choice, and you can take the light sentinels as essentially like a bodyguard unit to them, the way that Hive Tyrants have Tyrant Guard, for example, for those who remember Tyranids in 40k, where you have the lighter sentinels working as groups, but they're not actually a bodyguard. You're not sharing wounds between the two. They operate independently on the table. But you have heavy sentinels, and for every one unit of heavy sentinels, you can buy up to 3 units of light sentinels, something like that for a fast attack slot. Something like this would be a better way of doing it than what they've currently got. But yeah, I could go on for ages about possible what ifs and maybes of what could be done. But like I said before, question to you, audience, why do you think that the company is just so insistent on not fixing what is broken this edition. I've picked Solar Auxilia to focus on, but, Astartes, I can think of at least 4 legions which need a rewrite on their Legiones Astartes traits. That would be the Legiones Hereticus Emperor's Children, the Raven Guard, the Salamanders, and especially the Thousand Sons, and I'll give an honorary mention to the White Scars. Because, +1 movement on White Scars, you're going to tell me that's as good as +1 to all bolt and auto weapons to hit, like on Imperial Fists? Yeah, no, those aren't balanced at all. It's just the most basic tenet of balance, right? Give people equal shit for the same points. Well, Games Workshop doesn't know what that means. Anyway, back at the outer circle, thoughts, comments below, and I'll catch you on the next video.